Good morning.
Good
I
morning,
am,
everybody.
good morning. This is Anne Marie is with me today. I'm sure you all know her and love her as I do. David's out today, so I get the opportunity to step in and have a lovely conversation with Anne Marie. I'm so excited
Me
um,
too.
to talk about this topic because it is one of my very favorites. Um, how to find appreciation for transgressors, and it's always a work in progress, as I've discovered on my journey through boot camp and now out of boot camp, and getting to work with all these lovely boot campers that come through and then become part of our team and help with coaching and guiding. And Anne Marie always brings such a beautiful view and light to these topics. So I'm very excited to discuss it. One
Thank
thing
you.
that I discovered just this past week, actually past month, I I have lots of visitors this month, and they were childhood friends, and one in particular that I've probably known my whole life just about. And we had, oh, just reconnected and great fun. And it was so beautiful and just filled my heart and my soul that even though she lives really far from me. And over the years, we just didn't get to connect as often as we liked in person. But when we do, it's like no time has passed.
Yes.
And I love that. But what I did find is that a lot of my transgressor energy was showing up on occasion because I was getting frustrated with juggling. I now work from home and wanting to just spend complete time with her. And so there was just one little thing that I had talked about previously. So if you've heard the story, my apologies. But I was doing something on my phone, which was work related. And she was telling me a story. And then it dawned on me that felt, I could feel the energy shift that she was
Right.
feeling not heard. And I think I didn't clarify. And I think she thought, many of us just get on Facebook. Our phones are something we play with. And I was so happy that I have learned Tya tools and realized that the energy immediately shifted. So I put my
Mm.
phone down and I turned to her and I said, I am so sorry. I said, this was a work thing and I had forgotten about it and I need to give it some attention. So I said, if you will just give me 10 minutes to take care of this, I'm all yours. And I could feel the energy then shift back of, okay, you're not ignoring me. And I said, I'm so sorry. And so I took care of it. And then I turned my phone off and I turned to her and I became fully present.
Yes.
And Deborah Wilson shared something yesterday about being fiercely present, because I do think we forget with being in the 3D matrix world. And, in my life, dogs barking and there's still building going on where I moved, and noises and people and outside influences that can take our attention away. And so
Mhm.
I wanted her to feel heard and to know that whatever it was she was going to tell me or we were going to discuss, that I was fully present with her. And it was such a lovely experience in that she noticed the shift. She noticed the changes in me and that I'm so much happier, and my relationship with her just deepened to a whole new level. And just simply by knowing that transgressor energy, and we've all felt it, right? You're out to lunch with your friend and they start looking at their phone, or
Yes.
they get distracted and they didn't even hear what you had to say, or they want to jump in. They get excited and they want to jump in and you haven't finished. And we all do it. And so to slow it down, take that breath, and be fully present really can change immediately any transgressor energy, even if someone is upset with you. If you just allow them to get it out without getting triggered by doing
Yes.
being present and hearing them, hearing what they're saying before you jump in to defend yourself. And so anyway, that was a lesson I learned this week of one, communicating.
Yes.
I do work from home, give me, I need to be on this work call, or, I need to take care of some things, and then I'm 100% yours. And so anyway, it worked out. She loves laying by the pool. And so she would go lay by the pool in the mornings, and I would get my work done. And then I was 100% with her and focused on her instead of trying to juggle it all. I was taught as a mom and a businesswoman and a wife and sister, friend, you have to do it all, right? You have to juggle and multitask. And I realized that in doing that, I was not the best me.
Yes.
And so
That's so
changing
true.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And sorry, there's me interrupting you
no,
now.
I was going to say, I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, as you were saying that, just so many things were coming to my head, because the world has changed so much in the last couple of years. So the way we communicate, the way we work, the way we are at home, work's come into our houses now, and everything's changed, and it's adjusting to that and doing what's right for you. But you were so key on your communication, because that does keep everything open. Everybody knows, everybody feels heard. You can set your own boundaries. And, if somebody wants to talk to you and you're like, I really want to hear what you've got to say, but just give me 5 minutes to finish what I'm doing, and then I'm all yours. And you're just acknowledging, yes, I want to hear what you say. I know you've got something to tell me and I want to hear it, but I can't at the moment. And, like you said, your friend could then go off and sit by the pool, give you your time, and then there you're back at it. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I think time is definitely a transgressor for me, in respect that I'm just literally from here to here to here to here to here. I work full time. I do the Tya. I do LOA today with Walt, and I've got 2 young children and friends and a life that I want to live and dreams I want to do. So yeah, time's bonkers and time's my transgressor, but it's okay to have your boundaries around that, and yeah, being aware of the impact to others, isn't it?
Yeah. And I was just going to say, my children are grown now, but I remember very well having young children, and they are so beautiful because they do live so in the present, in the moment, and they want your attention and they want it now. And it always seemed that if I was on an important phone call or something, in my life was going on that really needed attention, they would, it's like it drew them in. And so I learned to be very descriptive with them, because I never wanted them to feel that I was too busy for them. I'm always here for them. And still, even as they grew up and went to college and things, I always told them, I'm always here for you. And, if the other thing I learned too in communication through boot camp, learning that one of my transgressors was that I had the need to fix everyone. I thought I've got to fix you. I've got to rescue you. I have all the answers, and realizing that I don't. I just need to be present for them.
Yes.
And so now I do ask my children, I said, are you telling me this just to listen, or are you wanting my opinion or advice? And oftentimes I just need someone to listen. And I love that, because as a mom, right, we wear our mom hat. And when our children are little, we do have to guide them, direct them, and give them guidelines and rules and encouragement to to make it, through the day and school and all the things that they need to do and learn. But as they grow up, that letting go of my children, not in the mom mode, but that I don't have to guide and direct them. They are on their own journey, whatever it looks like. And when I removed judgment and fear from that equation, which are two big transgressors we all have, right? Oh, what if they do this? Or, they're making a bad decision. Well, no, they're making a decision as an adult that works for them. It may not have worked for me. It may not have been the same way that I do things, but allowing them that space and encouraging them to say, I always say, you're smart, you'll figure it out,
Yeah.
And then if they do want my opinion and they say they do, then of course I will share my thoughts. But oftentimes I'm learning to ask that question. And even in looking back when I was director of rehab and for many years and worked with lots of different personalities and therapists. And looking back, I realized it would have been nice to ask on that first or second interaction with them, how do you best communicate?
Yes.
Instead of being the boss and giving orders, because not everybody communicates in the same way. So again, understanding how to appreciate those transgressors, appreciate the things that made you who you are, because all of those experiences we can label good, bad, different, really are not bad or good. They're just experiences of what created you. And what I've found also is some of my biggest transgressors were some of my best learning opportunities for inspiration.
Absolutely. If I have a spin out or I'm struggling with stuff and I don't use my toolkit and I don't deal with it effectively, but you know that you're going to come out the stronger, so much stronger for it. And that's the thing that gets me through it, is just going, well, this is happening for me, not to me. And I know I'm going to get through it. And when I get through it, I'm going to feel amazing. And the good thing I find is with having the young children is having them now younger, just tell them this is going to make you stronger. This is going to teach you. And it's freeing to not have their experiences on your shoulders. Yeah, we're going to parent them, but just knowing that it's their experience, they're going to learn and try and reduce the fear and the judgment from that. But yeah, definitely, absolutely, sort of with the whole transgressor energy, just knowing that you're going to go through a really hard period, but you're going to come out feeling. It just gets higher every time you come out of it, I find, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And oh my gosh, I just love what you just said about being able to be with your children at this young age and appreciating and understanding that they're going to create obstacles. It's part of life. It's part of the human experience. And as much as the mom instincts want to protect them from it, oftentimes they have to experience it for them to learn and grow. And that is such a lovely view, because I think sitting with them and unpacking, for lack of a better word, what happened in their day and viewing it from their little perspective. It reminds me of a story I will never forget. My daughter, who was so sensitive through school, she would come home and be like, she'd tell me everything, what the kids were wearing and what the teacher said. And I would get this full-on journal report from her. And one day she was just so upset. And she said, the kids were being so mean. And I said, well, what were they doing? Because instead of jumping, and I was so glad that for whatever reason at that moment, I was like, mean? What, who was mean and how were they mean? Instead of being like, oh, those kids shouldn't be mean. I was like, how are they being mean? And she's like, well, they didn't like the outfit that one of the little girls were wearing. And I said, oh. And I said, did they say mean things to her? And they said, no, they just they didn't like that color or whatever. And I said, well, that's really not mean unless they were making fun of her. It really wasn't mean. They have a right to like the color or not like the color. And I said, you're just so sensitive. I think you were feeling maybe what the little girl felt when they said they didn't like the color. And so we were talking about it, and I said, maybe when you go back to school tomorrow, you can ask her if she was upset by that. Like, did that hurt her feelings? Because it may not have hurt her feelings, but I know it hurt my daughter's feelings because she was just so sensitive. And so we often had to work through that. She was very shy, very sensitive. And so we had to work through those feelings, which taught me a lot because I was so not that kid.
Yeah. So, I say was that kid. I would have been like your daughter. I would have been like picking up and like taking all of that on me. So how wonderful that you could explore that with her.
Yeah.
But I think we could do that with adults as well. It doesn't have to be with children, does it?
No, because everybody has a right, number one, to feel the way they feel.
Sure.
That you feel the way you feel. That's there's such beauty in that. And I think, again, at least in the United States where I grew up, oftentimes, especially in the sports world, I was, don't cry, suck it up, get in there, play the game. You can worry about it later type of thing. So, and again, no judgment. I took that to literal because I am a literal thinker. And when you say something, I take it literally. So I did. I stuffed those feelings down and I went back in and, I ignored the pain. And, but it also was a lovely transgressor because when I went through boot camp, I realized that because I didn't know what I was feeling, I had a hard time understanding what others were feeling, which leads me back to my very first thing of asking, because now I am much more in tune with that, as I said, and could clearly see the energy shift with my friend where I would have never noticed that before boot camp, before learning where we are on our vibrational spiral. What am I feeling? And I love that because I do think it's so, as I said, it's so valid. And when children are little, to teach them what you're doing right now with them, that their feelings are valid.
Yeah.
And that they mean something. And you may have a child like yourself. You probably do. That's very, very sensitive. And then I had one of each. My son was just like me. He was, not that we're not sensitive. We're very kind and caring, but we don't take things so personal. Where my daughter, the crocodile tears because the little girl said, I don't like that color. I mean, just the poor kid was just sobbing. And of course she was, kindergarten age. 5 years old. But I was so glad that I had a child like that to teach me that that feelings are so valid and to discuss it. And I was she did teach me so much in bringing that. So I'm curious because you have two, right? 2 children?
I do. I've got one who, I don't want to say she's a drama queen, but she really is. Literally everything is drama. And she always looks on almost the so-called negative side of things. And the other one is more like myself, who's more empathic. And it is just different ways of exploring it with them. But like yesterday, they both came home really upset. Daddy had told them off because they'd been quite rude to him and he'd lost his temper. And, it's just that communication, that explaining it. Okay, so what do you need at the moment? Do you want to talk about it? Do you want me to have a word with your dad? And then explain to them, adults don't always necessarily get things right, and daddy maybe probably shouldn't have shouted at you. That's just a normal reaction, and that's fine. You know, anger's fine. Just trying to explain everything and navigate through it. It's exhausting, but you know, I also do that with adults. I'll always say to them, well, what do you need from me at work? If people are asking stuff, what do you need? What do you want from me? You know, it's just so that it's clear. I'm not doing more than I have to do, because that time element, which is my transgressor. But also, you're stating your boundaries, and it's to the point, and it's empowering to other people to ask them what do they need, and it's validating, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. I'm going to use that tool. Thank you. I love that. Because truly, we assume that everyone feels like we do or thinks like we do. And in doing this work and going through boot camp with so many different personalities and unique individuals, all with different views, really, really opened up my eyes to that. Yes, we're all human and we all think and feel, but it's not always the same. And so just that simple question, what do you need? And what do you need right now? I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what a great teaching tool for your children, because it is okay to be angry. We're human. It's a human emotion, and it is okay to be angry. And sometimes the anger, right, is a transgressor and a trigger, and we go off. We human. And so the lovely part is recognizing that, and then being able to sit down and talk about it, you know, when we settle down.
Exactly.
Yeah. And now I know I use those words with my kids, and they laugh at me because I'm like, ooh, that is triggering me. I need to do that. Let me go look at that. Let me meditate. Let me look at that a little bit and see where it's coming from, so that I can detune it. And we talk a lot about that in Tya, of detuning, and that's really just the process of figuring out what has triggered you, and possibly looking at it from a different view, and coming into that appreciation for it. And that's the difficult part in one sense,
really
but not
tricky
in another. Because if it's a very painful trigger, something traumatic, and we say, oh, appreciate it, you can't go right to appreciation. You have to process that, and it takes time. And that's what one thing that I absolutely loved about boot camp was the coaching pieces to help you work through that, because nobody can work through that by themselves, I don't believe. And because it's like saying, well, just get happy when you're, you stubbed your toe, or you just got in a car wreck, or, you dropped your coffee cup. The other day I dropped my coffee cup. Fortunately, it was not my Tya one. The coffee went all over, and I was very sad, because I love my coffee. And if you would have told me in that moment, appreciate that, get happy, I would have looked at you like, my coffee's all over the floor. I am not happy right now.
I've not had my coffee yet. I can't appreciate anything until I've had it.
Exactly. And I used to say that when I was in the sales world. I was in medical device sales, and I was loving my Starbucks quite often through the day. But my first Starbucks, I used to tease the gentleman. I'd be like, I need a coffee to order my coffee here. Because it's like, you got to know the
so
name.
much choice.
And they want you to go through fast. And it's like, too many choices. Don't ask me these questions. I haven't had coffee yet. But yes, finding that appreciation takes time. And especially to get to what we call radical appreciation in Tya, which means full on forgiving, in the sense that not forgiving of the act, but forgiveness of the situation and the pain, And it's
the
really
impact.
for yourself. It's really for yourself to
Mm.
let go of that anger and find, as you said earlier, that one, we created it, we called it in by our vibration, and being aware of that. And also, those things do make us so much stronger, and finding that appreciation, that especially when you can look back and understand that oftentimes those transgressors, if they were people, they were hurting too. And they laugh, and I've done it. We've all done it as parents. You get overwhelmed, you get caught up in life, and you lash out at your child, and you don't mean to hurt them. But you're just, it's like you just have all these emotions and things going on. And the lovely part, though, is recognizing it and being able, like you
Sure.
said, to sit down and unpack that with your kids was so beautiful.
Exactly, because one of my transgressor, inevitably, it's one of your parents. And when my mum was my age, she was a bit difficult to live with, and massive impacts to me, my confidence, and everything. And now I'm that age, I can understand where she was coming from, what was impacting her. But I have nothing but love now. I don't have any, since detuning it, and it just feels so much freer and so much more beautiful, and just to have nice memories back. But now I'm able to, if I'm behaving the same back, because these things what's it called? I can't think of the word, but it's history repeating itself, because we all have these patterns of our family. And now I can explain it. Now I can go, do you know what? Mummy's going a bit crazy because of A, B, and C. It's just what has affected me. It's not your fault. Talk to me about it. I'm an adult. I don't get everything right, and just being open with it, so that nobody's taking on what they shouldn't take on.
Yes, I love that. That's so beautiful. Because our kids do think, oh, the grown-ups know it all.
Yeah. and you know what? We were having real problems problems with my eldest. And when we sat down with her, I said, Mummy and Daddy don't know what we're doing. We've not been in this situation before, and we're working it out together. So if we do it wrong, you need to tell us. And sometimes you won't like it, but it's our rules and whatever, and we'll work it out together. We're a family. That's what we do. And wow, just so much stress and tension lifted just from that honesty. But one thing I did want to touch on is, when you're going through these things, and we said we'd ask my kids, like, what do you need? I ask myself that question. And I also visualize my inner child. It's almost like I'm pregnant again and I've got a little child inside me, but I'll also go to my inner child again. What do you need? She's just like, I need you to be kinder to me. And, and that's what I'll do. So I think that's a good thing for other people and ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. Stacy brought that to light yesterday in a meeting we had. Stacy, our lead coach, and she said that oftentimes she asks herself as if she was 3 years old again. And I thought that was so beautiful. Like, are you hungry? Are you tired? These things, because I know I do that myself. We get in work mode, get it done mode. And oftentimes I just take off and I'm running and doing, and especially when my kids were home and in sports, and, we were always running, and I would forget to eat. I mean, I wouldn't think about it. And then it's like, all of a sudden, there's that big angry bear that's starving that shows itself. And I'm like, ooh, I am very crabby. I need to eat something,
Exactly.
or I'm really tired. And so I love that you said that, just explaining that to your kids too. And I oftentimes would just say, can we talk about this tomorrow? I'm exhausted, and I want to give it the full attention that it deserves. So I love that question again, is what do you need from me now? Would have been a beautiful question for me to ask, because did you need something now? If it's simple, I can take care of it. But if it's going to be, some long drawn out process, you're going to have to give me till the morning when I get some. So, and I love it. Cheryl joined us and she said, what do you need from me? And then my telling her just to listen, or say, do you want my opinion or do you need me to listen? She said tools for her. Thank you. Yes. I learned communication, I think, is such a important piece as human beings. And we're not taught sometimes how best to communicate. And so these simple questions that have come up in learning our Tya tools, and also, my favorite always, like you said, asking yourself, but checking in, where am I on my vibrational spiral? Because if I am depleted and I'm tired and I'm hungry and I, had some transgressor energy show up and I'm agitated or feeling a bit triggered, I'm not my best person. So even just taking those few minutes to be like, okay, maybe I need a snack and sit down a minute and get a vibrational adjustment before I can communicate with you. And it's okay to say that. We all do that. I mean, when you're working a job, you get a break. And I know when I worked in the hospital years and years ago, we had a break room and I loved it. I loved to go in the break room, but it was so chaotic because so many of us would be in there and talking all at once that I needed a real break. And I was so happy that I recognized that. And so I would walk outside. I would get out in nature. I've always been a nature person. And we used to call it back in the day an attitude adjustment. I would go out and kind of just get an attitude adjustment because working in the medical field, of course, you have to, at least I felt like I had to bring my best self. These people are hurting and they're not feeling good. And last thing they need from me is for me to be impatient with them when they're, so I had to get an attitude adjustment, which now I know is my vibrational check-in. So it's okay to take a moment. Even like you said, when your kids come to you, I love it. I love that you brought this, and this is to me another really great Tya tool of leaning back and saying, what is it do you need from me to other people, but also yourself?
Yeah.
How beautiful is that? To be
Exactly.
kinder to yourself.
Sure. I think we spend so much time giving to other people. Like, I've got to be a good mum. I've got to be a good employee. I've got to be a good friend. I've got to be a good daughter, whatever it may be. And you're giving a lot away. And we forget about ourselves. And it's giving yourself permission to be selfish, to be greedy, whatever it needs for you to fill your little void to keep you going, because nobody can pour from an empty cup. You need to look after yourself as well. And I think I certainly know that I sometimes my own transgressor in that respect.
Oh, yes.
With my own expectations of what I've got to deliver and what I've got to do and how I should be and how I should look, how I should dress, whatever it may be. And actually, it's just sometimes it's just, all I need to do is sit on the sofa and read a book. That's what I'm doing. And giving yourself permission and not feeling guilty for it. Because I do have found in my lifetime, I'm not my own worst enemy. And I think we do need to look after ourselves. And that's something Tya gave permission for me to do.
That's beautiful. Wow. Huge aha moment, because that self-judgment piece goes back to one of the very first lessons we learn in Tya Boot Camp, right? Is as David calls it, the Claude voice, that voice that we all hear, oh, you're not being good enough. You're not being a great friend. You're not. Instead of being kinder to ourselves. And I remember oftentimes that self-judgment of just beating myself up for a day that I felt, with regrets of, I should have been a better mom. I should have been a better friend. I lost my cool. I had road rage, and I would just literally beat myself up. And looking back at that, truly, like you said, that's the transgressor energy to self. That self piece of, we would never say that to our child or our best friend. If they had a rough day, you're going to pull them in and give them a hug and say, it's okay. You lost your cool. It happens, right? We would not. And so being that best friend to yourself, I love you saying that, like having that inner child within you and being like, no, I'm not going to beat you up. You made a mistake, or, you were triggered. It's okay. Let's look at that. Let's look at that. And maybe tonight, let's not look at it. Let's get on the sofa and read that book and just fill ourselves up. And tomorrow, maybe we can look at that and view it from a higher vibrational perspective when you're more rested and full. Because you're right, you cannot drink from an empty cup. And as I said earlier, I felt like I was so taught to do it all. Yeah. Working mom, go to work, take care of your kids, run a household, drive them to their sporting events, be at all the games, be the big cheerleader, all these things that I felt I had to do. And by the end of the day, there was nothing left. I was empty. My energy was just gone. And now viewing that from a different perspective of, I don't have to do anything. No. What do I choose to do? And do I choose to do it in a passionate, excited, joyful way? Because it is just an experience. And I loved my job, and I loved my children, and I loved my life. But I also allowed myself to give to the point that I was empty. And that is being your own transgressor in fear and judgment, right? And when we let go of that, let go of the fear of being judged, and knowing you come to work and you're being the best Anne-Marie that you can be. Mm-hmm. And that's perfect. That's perfectly imperfect in the human experience.
And I don't have to be the best Anne-Marie all the time. I can be the best Anne-Marie for now. And I've told you before, haven't I? I have my Claude voice, but I've now introduced a Belle voice. So when my Claude voice is Myrtle, but when Myrtle picks in going, you should be doing this, but I'll come saying that it's fine, you're okay, you're really clever, or you're being kind to yourself, or you're beautiful, or whatever. So it's just countermeasures what's going on with that, and it just being that little bit kinder to yourself. And we all have our moments. I don't think that's ever going to change. But it's not having so much guilt around it and being a bit freer with it.
Oh, yes.
I just adore that.
Isn't it? I adore it too. And I live in so much more joy when I can be that way. And I remember you saying that, and my Claude voice was Agatha. And I had this, I'm a visual learner. And so I sat down with Agatha in my mind, and I just loved on her, because I thought that voice is the voice of somebody who's been hurt, who has a lot of transgressors that they haven't worked through. And so it was so beautiful. And I haven't picked a new name, but I am seeing Agatha in a new light. So when she does show up, I can appreciate her. Yeah. And then, like you said, then be kinder and be like, well, just, I think of it as like my 3-year-old. If I was teaching my 3-year-old and she said something unkind, I would say, well, how can we better voice that? That's a little harsh or a little unkind. Yes. And so I thought I could teach that voice to be kinder. kinder to me. My dog
Definitely.
says, yes, be
Yeah,
kinder.
well on board with that one. And to be fair, I was just thinking about when you were saying that, because you said you haven't named your other voice, and actually that other voice may not be Belle. That other voice is actually me talking to Myrtle. Myrtle could be that inner child who's, yeah. And actually that's me being kinder to Myrtle, being kinder to myself, being kinder to my inner child, and just appreciating myself and letting us grow together, because it's improved my self image and my self confidence by doing that. And I think one of these things is obviously when you go into Tya or when you do any kind of practice, you want to self grow, don't you? That's the ultimate goal, to make your life more joyful, I think. And it's working. It's getting there.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's so beautiful. Yeah, and actually, I mean, all those voices in our head are pieces of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I, growing up, I never knew other people had voices in their head. And I didn't voice that out loud because I thought they're going to think I'm kooky.
Well,
And
yeah.
yeah, I
That's what
wrote.
society says. That if you're hearing voices, we're going to ship you away.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
okay.
It's okay. We all
It's
have
okay.
them. And I used to write stories all the time when I was young, and I was very imaginative, and I had imagination, imaginative friends and tea parties, and I was so into that realm. But now looking back, I realize that I was in touch with all those voices,
Yeah.
and not knowing they were pieces of me, but somehow, like I said, somehow I knew I couldn't really tell people that. But later, when my kids were growing up, I said something about the 49 voices in my head, and they looked at me, and so we sat down and we talked about it, because my son, again, I never thought to ask how they processed and thought until I went into physical therapy, and I actually was a traumatic brain injury therapist, and so I worked with a lot of neurologically involved people, children and then adults. And so I had to learn about the brain processing and all that from a scientific view. And so I had asked my kids, because my son is very much like me. He's a visual learner, and he sees in pictures. My daughter is not. She doesn't like, we had this long conversation about, I said, well, picture an apple. And she's like, okay. And I'm like, do you have it? She's like, well, I guess so. And it was interesting because we had this long conversation, because I said, when you ask me to picture an apple, I've got the apple, now the tree's growing and there's people coming and
Oh,
they're
wow.
picking. It's like this whole movie plays
Yeah.
out in my head. And which now I know I can channel that energy into creative writing, and I do write stories and I love it. But she doesn't see things that way. So,
No.
actually, my daughter and I are creating together a book about children and how they see the world so differently, and so much like you said, one that sees more of this view and
Yeah.
more, not, and I hate to say negative and positive because it's her view, but I understand
Yeah.
what you're describing, because that was my daughter and my son. Um, you
Mhm.
know, he never, and he's still that way. He never worries about where anything's coming from, or, you know, he always the mindset, well, if it breaks, I'll get a new one, I'll get shoes when I need them. And where my daughter was always like, I need new shoes. I need new shoes. And it's like, we just bought you new shoes. Yeah, but they don't go with this outfit. And I was like, so it's interesting how they are processing and learning. And I love that you can bring to them that inner voice of saying, let's be kinder to
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you need? Like,
Yeah.
that's simple. I keep going back to that because I get just this huge yes of how simple to teach a child, what do you need in this moment? Yeah. Did you
Yeah.
skip lunch? Did you, those kind of things? It's like, are you hungry? Do you need a snack after school? Maybe you'll feel better, and it'll look brighter after you've eaten something. And
It's like,
mommy and daddy aren't perfect. I love that.
yeah, and most of the times they just want a hug. They just want some kind of connection because they're feeling a little lonely or whatever it may be. And sometimes I'll be crying and I just won't even try and fix it. I won't even ask. I would just put my hand on their leg or their back until they're ready to communicate it.
Yes. Oh, that's so beautiful, because again, crying is a beautiful emotion. And why we get so uncomfortable with that. I've been really
Yeah.
sitting with that, because I think because we want to fix it. We know they're sad and we want to fix it, but it's okay. They need to release those emotions. We're designed that way as humans. And it's good to gosh, sometimes a good cry just feels fabulous,
Oh,
right? When you're
I
done,
love a cry.
oh, that felt so good. To release all that energy that builds up in our bodies of transgressor energy and triggers. And as I said, just the dynamics of being out in the world, it's noisy. And it's full of stimulus and input. And the interesting and fun piece to me now, and this will be hopefully a takeaway for everyone, is in finding that appreciation, it doesn't have to mean full on, you love them, forgive them, you want them back in your life if it was a person, or as simple. I always go back to, I had road rage when I was younger. And so I would be driving and find myself getting angry at drivers that would not put their turn signal on, or totally things out of my control. But I think
can't imagine you like that.
I know. Oh, you should hear stories from my children. But I think it was my release back then, because I didn't stay in touch with how I was feeling or what I needed. And so that was like releasing the steam. I could yell at this random driver and not really hurt anybody's feelings. And it was just kind of a release. But now in boot camp, looking back at that, transgressor energy again was myself, of stuffing down my feelings and not having that release, not allowing myself that good cry, not allowing myself to even say, wow, that makes me angry. Let me look at that. And so I can appreciate now how silly I was yelling at some driver that, I mean, so what? They cut me off. Nobody was hurt. There was no accident, or they didn't turn their turn signal on, and, something so silly, or they took my parking space that I was waiting for. Who cares in the big scheme of things? But at the moment, it felt so wrong, and that's judgment.
Yeah,
that was
absolutely.
Judgment. Yes. And now I can look back at that and really appreciate it, and radically appreciate it, because now I can laugh about it. And I don't beat myself up for it. It was an experience that I had, and it was a lovely experience, because it's what brought me here. So if you can find appreciation for the simple triggers and transgressors, that's a very good start to learning how to view it from a different perspective. And my big favorite takeaway from you, Anne Marie, is, what do you need? I'm going to ask myself that more often.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I love end of day journaling and exploring these things that happen in the day. And if I have done things how I don't perceive I should have done, then I just go, what am I going to do different tomorrow? What have I learned from this? Where's that come from? And you explore it. And like you say, you end up laughing about it. What a wonderful medicine that is. Just having a good laugh. Just find it so therapeutic. It's just gorgeous.
It is so therapeutic. And again, as I said, I always bring things that other people have taught me. And one of my favorite conversations was with Stacy. And, you know, when you were young, and we've all done it, I'm sure, in college days, or, you know, in your youth, when you were free and crazy and you do something and it didn't work out, and you'd be like, well, it sounded like a good idea at the time. And so that one always too kind of, to me, feels less judgmental of, I shouldn't have done that, versus, wow, I thought, you know, I thought it was a good idea at the time, or I thought I could handle
it. Work.
Yeah, that didn't work. How can we make this work? And just finding, again, that kindness to yourself. That's a big one. Just be a little kinder to yourself. We're all trying to make our way in this lovely human experience. And I think kindness, not only to others, but really to yourself, is so big. So if that's all you can do, and sit in appreciation of that you're still here and you're breathing, and you did the best you could that day, that's a beautiful place to start in appreciating. And Cheryl said she chose Agatha for her name last night. Funny. My Agatha came from one of my favorite movies, Matilda.
Matilda. Yeah, I was going to ask if it's Matilda.
Yes, and that mean principal, that her name was Agatha. And that's because I was trying to find a name that I could separate that voice from myself. Because I think in the beginning, you have to see it clearly and recognize when it shows up. Even though it's really a piece of us, if you can give it a separate name and recognize it, then you can start to begin to transmute it to a softer, kinder bell voice, which I love, or even just recognize for what it is. And I love David's always said, I'm not playing that game today. We're not playing beat up on David today. Yeah. So
actually, if you name it, it almost becomes like almost kind of like a separate entity, but then you observe it more, because before, these things used to be so constant, because I was never like that free spirit younger. I was all, if I made a mistake, I beat myself up massively for it from a very young age. So I was able to then recognize that this voice was going on, because I never heard it before. It was just constant. So then I could hear it, because it was just normal. So it was nice to name it and acknowledge it.
Yes, and it kind of brings it to, like you said, brings it to the forefront, because it was always running. You didn't even know. That's oh my gosh, that's such an interesting point, because again, we all think differently, and I knew that voice was in there, and sometimes I would allow it to beat up on me, but other times I wouldn't listen. And it always reminded me, there was a cartoon when I was little, and you may be too young for this, but it had the little angel on one side and the little devil in this cartoon. And the devil would be like, do it. Yeah. Steal that candy.
I think that was Tom and Jerry, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. Tom and Jerry. And again, like, I was such a visual learner. I was always like, oh, that's my little devil voice, you know? And I'd be like, nah. But somehow through my teen years and my adult years, I lost that childlike belief in myself and wonderment that I think most of us are born with, this self-identity of knowing, you know, children typically know their worth. They're very much in their own bubble. And, you know, look at me, look what I can do. And, you know, so proud of themselves. But then somewhere along the way, the transgressor energy pops up, you know, and it just takes one person to say, like, for me, mine was a first grade teacher. It was one of my transgressors that I realized and went back to, that was always telling me I talked too much and I had too much imagination. Always got in trouble for daydreaming and invent, and it was funny because no matter who they put me next to, I would start talking to them. I never met a stranger. So that was not effective in my world of moving, but I did spend many days out in the hallway. And because I'd get in trouble, and that's what they did in the school I went to. They put you in the hallway. And I remember one time being so embarrassed. And I was probably 6 or 7. And it was winter time. So the coats were all hanging out in the hallway. And I remember getting behind the coats because I didn't want the other kids to see that I had gotten in trouble. And so again, that transgressor energy, and I probably didn't even voice that to my parents when I got home. But like I said, going through boot camp and looking at that and appreciating now that first grade teacher who reminded me of Agatha Trenchball from the movie, which is how I came up with that name. But that she must have been really hurting herself to and possibly, I don't know, that's possibly how teachers were taught back then. They all had to sit in their desks and be quiet. And so I can appreciate her now. But at the time, that created self-doubt and that little voice of shame and judgment. And
exactly.
But as I said, now I can appreciate it and laugh.
Do you know what that reminds me of, bizarrely though? It reminds me of the conversation you had earlier with your friend, because I don't think your teacher was feeling heard because you was talking. And actually she stifled something of you that actually is a skill that many need, but she wasn't feeling heard as a teacher. So yeah, it's being aware. And I think Tya teaches you that, is being aware of how you react to people so that it's not triggering. I mean, I do say to my children, my job is to mess you up.
Yes, exactly.
It's my job.
I say that too. But that's beautiful. And again, I never even looked at that perspective. And I can even appreciate that teacher even more now, because I know the kind of kid I was. I had a child like that was going 100 miles an hour. I was very, I would have been labeled ADHD now. I was high energy, had a hard time sitting in my seat. And I talked 100 miles an hour. And so she was probably trying to teach a lesson, but my little 5-year-old or 6-year-old perception of her yelling at me, or she probably didn't yell. She probably just asked me to be quiet for a minute. And then I didn't. So I got sent to the hallway because she's trying to teach the other children. I totally get it now. But when you're so little, your world is so small, and you oftentimes don't know how to process that. So that's beautiful, because she was probably just trying to teach the lesson. And she may have even said it kinder to me, but as a child, I was so in my little world and thought that everything I had to say was way more important than what she had to say.
Exactly. But little Kerry felt humiliated and punished for being herself. And then, there's just so much that comes with it. Gosh, isn't life complicated? No wonder it's a journey.
Yes, it is so complicated, but I love it. I love that.
I love that we can make it easy.
We can make it easy, and we can give our next generation the tools. We can give people the tools to avoid the transgressor energy that can happen in a miscommunication by simply being present and listening and saying, I hear you. I hear you're upset. I understand. What do you need from me right now?
Yeah.
Can I help? Or do you need me to just listen? Beautiful questions that are so simple. And it's lovely. I would love to be a little fly on the wall with your children at school, because I could hear them. I could hear them saying, when someone's spinning out, going, what do you need right now? Little Anne Marie. I could totally see it. I love it.
Yeah, but then I could just see my kids going, I don't need you asking me more questions.
True. My son was absolutely that little man. I think it was the second or third day of his kindergarten year. And I said, how was school today? And he's like, same as the first day. Stop asking me. I was like, okay. Yeah, he did not like to tell about his day.
But you were asking the right questions, and like you say, you were being present.
Mm-hmm.
And they can look back and know that. They might not have answered, they might not have needed what you wanted, but they knew you were there.
Yes.
And
I think, yes, every parent out there, I think, again, be kinder to yourself, because you've never been a parent before and there is no parenting book. Every child is so different and will teach you so much. And so that's my advice to parenting. Be kinder to yourself. You're doing the best that you can. And kids, they grow up and we're supposed to mess them up. It's the human process.
It's part of the objective of the role.
Yeah, and that's why there's aunties and uncles and grandmas and grandpas and good friends that you can say, go over there and play for a little while so mommy can fill herself up a little bit. Yeah.
Perfect.
Oh, Anne Marie, I could talk to you all day. I just love your view and take on things that I always have a aha moment or I've never looked at it like that. And that's just so lovely. So thank you. And I hope that
thank you.
We have helped others out there listening to find appreciation, not only for your transgressors, but really find appreciation for yourself. You're making your way. You're on this adventure. And if you can bring a little appreciation and joy and humor to your day, then I think you're doing pretty well.
Absolutely. You're doing a great job.
Yes, thank you. And David is off next week. He is in the process of moving, and which is fun. I'm so glad that we didn't all move at the same time, because I was in the process of moving in January to February.
Yeah.
And he's in the process of moving. And our Tya coach, Stacy, who is our lead coach, is off on an adventure with her husband on the Pacific Trail. I'm not a hiker, so I don't remember the name, but they're hiking the Pacific coast from starting in San Diego, I believe, all the way up to the Canada border, which is a long hike. So Stacy is following, and in their new mobile home, or I don't know what you call it, but the home that they're pulling along. And so she is parking and then joining him on some of the hikes, and then others she is restocking, and they have their dog.
Oh, perfect.
Yes, it's so lovely. So she is also in and out depending on her internet connection. So, and that's the beauty that we get to have of working live is, and from home, is that they can do that. So Tya Talk will not be next week, but we'll return the following week. And I'll announce that too in the newsletter. But yeah, David will be off next week because he's moving, and very excited about that. And again, thank you so much, Anne Marie. You always take time
thank you, Kerry,
to join us and share your wisdom and your beauty and your light. It is so appreciated. Thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody. I am going to work.